welcome to another episode of Ask an Assistant, the podcast for executive assistants and the people that love us. I'm your host, Jess Lindgren. Let's get to work. So on this week's episode, I would like to introduce you to something that I am presently calling the Importance of Language series. And by that, I mean the number of things in this world, the number of words, at least in the English language. I'm sure people that are speakers of other languages can commiserate. Hopefully it's not quite as bad as it seems to be in English sometimes, but an example popped across my Slack workspace earlier this week where my executive said to me, "Hey Jess, for Thursday, might there be a way to push the lunch and then therefore the coffee up by 30 minutes? I need a bit more time to drive since something is getting rescheduled into that break beforehand." So the key phrase that I'm looking at there that is important and maybe a little ambiguous is, can we move that up by 30 minutes? What do we mean by up? I think there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of gray area, a lot of different perspectives that people might have. If somebody said, could you move something up on my calendar versus down? Could you move it back on my calendar versus forward? Could you move it ahead? Could you, so this is something that I definitely look to see what someone is saying. And I did have some context clues there. He said up, but then he also said, I need a bit more time to drive. So definitely not asking for something to be made earlier on the calendar. It was asking for something to be made later on the calendar. And to that end, rather than get into some kind of semantic discussion with my executive or sit down and hammer out what exactly they meant by that, I just said, hey, no worries. It'll be easy to reschedule. To confirm, presently, lunch is scheduled for 11:30 a.m., coffee at 12:30 p.m. following lunch. New or proposed, lunch at 12 noon, coffee at 1. It eliminated a big, deep discussion that we needed to have about whether or not he meant earlier or later. And that is definitely something I try to be very precise with all of my language and say, and obviously nobody's perfect. I'm not saying that I'm walking around this world perfectly expressing myself every time that I make a request of somebody or make a statement. That is not what I'm talking about. But I do, when I have time to sit down, write it out, think about before I hit send to someone, I do try to be very precise. So basically just saying, okay, you said up. Did you mean back? Did you mean forward? Did you mean earlier? Did you mean later? Try to get to the simplest, most black and white version of the word. So saying something is up, digging into this a little bit, actually, it led me down a pretty fascinating rabbit hole. There are some very fierce proponents of even using up as the example, people that really feel that something being moved up means earlier. And I get that. And people that think moving it up, like up being earlier is where I also fall. So having the context clue in this specific example of I need more drive time, I knew my executive didn't mean earlier. I knew he meant later. And clearly there are people that think saying up means to move it later. Again, just led me down a really fascinating internet Reddit hole. And you know that if it's on Reddit, it must be true. Lots of contrasting opinions either way. Really brought up some interesting examples of spring ahead, fall back. So daylight saving time. How does that fit into your worldview of up and down, back and forth when it comes to time? Thinking about the example of bring something forth, bring it forward. That typically means make it sooner, make it happen now. Thinking about things like movie releases or project deadlines. If something got pushed back, that means the project is due later. That means the movie is being released later. If something got pushed up or brought up or moved up, that means it's happening sooner. So just making sure that you're on the same page with somebody and just take that beat before you hit send or find yourself in some kind of time wasting debate. Just get it down to that simplest, do you mean earlier or later? And the example that came to my eyes, anyhow, while I was looking into this, that really made the most sense is definitely newer. It's something that now that everyone has a digital calendar, talking about moving things up or down in your calendar. So like if I'm in my executive's calendar and I'm dragging the appointment, am I dragging it up or am I dragging it down? Am I moving it earlier or am I moving it later? So just a little place where, like I said, the language in so many situations is so important, but in this situation specifically, it just happened to have occurred this week, something that I thought would be interesting to talk about. I would love to hear from any and all of you, as always, about anything that might be on your mind, but also about this in particular. When you are moving things around a calendar, are you moving it up or down? Are you moving it forward or backward? Are you bringing it sooner or later? Like really get yourself down to that sooner or later. askanassistant.com. I would love to hear from you again now or in the future. Anything that's on your mind, my ears are open. Hope you have all had a great start to your week. And from here on out, from my podcast closet to your ears, take care.